Good morning, y'all. We're back here at Straightforward Therapeutics, and I am doing my first official interview with probably the most favorite person, well, not probably, the most favorite person in my world, which is my wife, Gina, aka Sparky. That's what I call her. And anyway, we've been talking about relationship here in this series, and hopefully you've been gaining a lot from it. Relationship, as I've said already every time, is the most important thing on the planet in my book. Basically, first your relationship with God, then your relationship with your family and those people around you. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so when we're in good relationship with others, we can be in good relationship with God. So the reason why I brought my better half here in to this picture today is because me and my wife have been married 39 years. Well, not quite 39, but we'll make it, Lord willing, if I keep breathing. And anyway, we've had a wonderful marriage. But just like every marriage, you start out learning and learning about one another and such. And I was definitely the one on the lower end of the learning curve when it came to relationship, because I never really I was 29 years old when we got married, and I really had never had really too many serious relationships. And but my wife, on the other hand, she was a student of friendship and relationship. And I remember when we first got married, a funny story. We were living pretty much hand to mouth back in those days. Finances were very lean. And my wife would be going out to the drugstore and buying birthday cards for all her friends. And I was like, man, we can't afford to keep buying these birthday cards. Everybody's got to be born on some day. It's not that big a deal. But I wanted to kind of get her inside a little bit today on relationship, because she's got a whole wall full of books that talk about it. So Gina, first question I'd really like to ask is like I said, when we first met, it was obvious that you held friendship and relationship in very high regard. And like how did that come about? Why was that something that was so meaningful to you?
Well, I guess partly being a missionary's kid and, moving some and not being in a location where you had friends that you saw daily and stuff. And so, it was kind of intrigued me, because you see a lot of times people have friends, but they're best buds today, and tomorrow they're talking about each other and just at each other. And so I was like, I want to find out how. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a person that others can depend on and know that I've got their back, and that they depend on me.
So, like when we got together, you had a good idea of what a solid relationship looks like and what you wanted it to be like. And I know that, as I mentioned previously, I just got saved about 2 months prior to meeting Gina. And so I was really in a huge learning stage in my life. I had never really been responsible. I had not really been very, involved with anybody on a long-term basis. And I want you to be real honest here, okay? So what do you feel like was like just starting out in marriage and trying to make that relationship like you wanted it to be? What do you feel like was like the biggest challenge as far as just dealing with me personally? I know we made it our point to put God in the center of our relationship. Was the best thing you can possibly do. If you ever want to have a successful marriage or relationship, you got to have God as the head. But beyond that, what do you feel like were the challenges that were right off, that were kind of like surprises for you?
I think part of it was because, as you said, you were street smart, because you'd been on the streets, and but learning how to really value people and value your relationship and invest in those relationships where, it wasn't just, if you got something from them, good, you like being around them, good, but it's like, this is a reciprocatory relationship, and a lot of times what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And so really just you valuing people, valuing those relationships.
Mm-hmm. And I know one of the biggest struggles I had, and even, further on, and probably still struggle with a little bit at different times, is just trusting people. Having a, relationship is based on trust. And I remember one time years ago when I was pastoring, and, you asked me a question one time that was very meaningful. I think we were getting ready to take a nap or something. We were just laying on the bed in the afternoon, and you looked at me and asked me, "Do you love yourself?" And I thought, man, I don't really think I do love myself. And so one of the things you said was, you can't love others if you don't love yourself. And that's really true. And, a lot of times our relationships that we're trying to form, or if we struggle in our relationships, maybe a good place to start with that is, looking at ourselves and just asking ourselves, what kind of relationship do we have with ourselves? Do we see ourselves as valuable? Do we see ourselves as someone who's meaningful, who has purpose in the world, who's made in the image of God, who is, who has worth? And, if we don't see ourselves like that, man, it's really hard to value other people. One of the things I've heard you tell other people a lot of times is that early on in your life, you read a book, an old book. It's been around for a long time, by Dale Carnegie. And it's called
How to Win Friends.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. Talk about that a little bit. What did you learn from that? And would you still recommend that book?
Oh, definitely. Well, it's been a while since I read it, but one of the things I remember is, remembering people's names. They say the sweetest sound to a person is the sound of their own name. Somebody else, remembering their name. And, find out what is important to that person. If you, listen to them and listen, picking up those little things that they mention that they really like, they like doing, or they like seeing or going or whatever. And just those things that, is important to them, and utilizing those in your relationship, not as a manipulative thing, but because you care about them. You care about this person, and so there's various others, but those are two of them that really stood out to me that I can remember right now. It's probably been 30 years since I've read it. So.
Well,
Need to go read it again.
Well, I know that when you engage with people, whether it's at church or whatever, we cook steak at our son-in-law and daughter's resort on the weekends, and cook some ribeye steak, and so we meet a lot of people. And anyway. One of the things that you often do is you will ask questions, get their story. What's your story? And sometimes she'll just say that, what's your story? And, I really learned a lot from that in the sense that, people generally like to tell you their story. They will tell you where they come from, and they'll open up a little bit if you give them an opportunity to. And I know when I was pastoring, here in Knoll, before I started into my counseling degree, people would come, and when you pastor a Pentecostal church, I'm just going to be straight up with you. You do get some quirky people sometimes. Those are the people that usually sit right on the front row too. And anyway. But before when I was pastoring, the people would come in, and you'd think to yourself, that person's a jerk, or that person's just weird, or that person's this or that or the other, and and I just blow them off like that. I'd think in my mind, this is the category I'm going to put them in. And then once I started doing counseling, I started doing a little psychoanalysis, I'm like, I'm going to find out why this person is like this. And so when you start asking people their stories and you start getting their backgrounds and you understand, where they came from and what made them like they are. Now then, if I have somebody that I'm in a relationship with, and there's something about them that really puzzles me or is troubling in some way, I'll make it my point. I'm going to find out why they're like that. And because when I figure out why they are like they are, it helps me to understand how to deal with them, and then also it helps me to have compassion and empathy for their situation. Because hey, if that's the way you came up, that's the way you were raised or whatever, that's probably why you are like you are, and so it helps you to understand them. And so anyway,
one of the things about the story is, everybody has a story, but not everybody gets to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And so many people die with that story inside of them. Mm-hmm. And, just like recently I heard of this lady that you wouldn't even, not even think about this being something about her life, but she said when she was a young lady, she actually worked at or volunteered at Walter Reed Hospital in DC, and I thought, wow, that is, I've heard about that hospital, but all of a sudden you look at this lady differently because you know part of her story. And when you know their story, you value them more, and you can appreciate, and also it's a conversation point later you can go back to, and, when you know other stories about maybe something they're struggling in, you're able to go and then you can pray. That's a point of prayer that you can do for them, which is great in relationships. But also, that's something that when you're together, you can converse about. And even a lot of times that brings another story, another thing. And that makes them feel valued because they feel heard. So many people don't feel heard. They're shut down. Mm-hmm. And so, and even though these people, a lot of times we meet, when we're cooking, I'll never see them again. But here's the deal. When they walk away, not only are they having a good steak to eat, but they felt good, hopefully, about the conversation as they were waiting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. About how do you make... People don't care about really how much you know, but they do care about how they feel when they're with you, mm-hmm. and around you.
Right. What's that saying? People don't care what you know unless they know you care.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's not enough caring going on. And it doesn't have to be a deep relationship or whatever to care about people. Yeah. Just to give even a simple smile sometime to people,
If you think about Jesus, when Jesus walked on this earth, he touched a lot of people. And but other than the disciples, and a few others that were close to him, he likely never ran across those people again. But he made a meaningful impact in the moment that he had, by sharing and taking time. I think about the woman at the well when he sat there and she was a little confused in her theology and she had some messed up background and whatever. But, he was willing to sit there and listen and converse with her on her level. One of the things that comes to mind when it comes to like a marriage relationship or our relationship, we don't do this much anymore because we've kind of worked out a lot of kinks in 38 years. But, I remember for a long time, we would, sometimes it would happen about maybe every 6 or 8 months or something like that. And we would have one of those conversations where, we're just in the bedroom with the door shut, sitting on the edge of the bed and really opening up and telling each other, this is what bothers me. This is what is going on. This is what, I wish you would work on, blah, blah, blah. And it was both ways, like we would share with one another. And a lot of times those conversations involve some tears and some heart searching. But you know what? It was good because it helped me to see myself in the light that she sees me in. Because we have a certain perspective that we look at things and we think, well, this is the way everybody sees me. And, and generally that's really not true. We don't really see ourselves, and people don't see us in the same light that we see ourselves a lot of times. And so I know, if you were this is a person who gives a lot of advice. Don't you think that there's relationships comes easier to some people than others? And, I know that you are an encourager and you're a servant. And so you invest yourself in people's lives. And, I've seen throughout the years, there's times when people are just drawn to you because they know that you'll listen and they know that you've got wisdom and that you're going to give them some good advice. And but then there's other people that really are not that easy as far as struggling as engaging with people. And so anyway, if you were to give some advice to people who are struggling and trying to form relationships, or maybe they're in a marriage where relationship is being a real challenge, what would you say? What would be some things you would tell them?
First off, just listen to their complaining, their griping, their struggles. Take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes let it go in one ear and out the other. Pick out what really is key, you think, in the relationship. A lot of times asking questions, questions and you can ask questions the more you listen. You know where you're going and trying to go. And just loving that person, finding out what their key is, and sometimes you can only go so far. They've got walls, they've got fences. They're not. And a lot of people have never really had a relationship where people listen to them. People tell them what to do, tell them this, and I'm going to tell you this, and what. But people to open up, a lot of times you got to be open as well. If you want them to be open, after you've listened to them, questions, talk, then you have the opportunity to open up to them. And a lot of times it's a light comes on.
Yeah, I think a lot of times being transparent and vulnerable allows people to be transparent and vulnerable. And I think I mentioned a couple of videos ago, if you invite somebody to be vulnerable and transparent with you, you better be willing to respond to them in a right way, because if you tell them they're going to be safe in saying whatever they need to say, and then immediately you react in a negative way and make them feel unsafe, that's pretty much all you're going to get. They're going to remember that in their mind. They're logging that, and they're saying to themselves, "I'm never going to do that again." And so anyway. Last thing, and then we'll shut her down here. But talk about your relationship with God a little bit. How you built your relationship, because you're a person who is very close to the Lord, and you were so much further along with your relationship with Christ than I was when I met you. But just if you had to give a couple of pieces of advice to somebody about how to grow in the Lord and just have that right relationship, what would you say?
Just as any relationship, it takes time and experiences, things that you go through. And I became a Christian when I was 8 years old. I was raised up Christian home my whole life, but realized at 8 years old that I needed Jesus for me. And really a relationship of just learning to trust. As I look at my relationship now, it's my Heavenly Father. Just as my earthly father, I trusted him. And it's built over just so many little things. I think as I'm out doing things, and many times I'm kind of a problem solver, and I don't always have the answers. And sometimes I'll look at and say, Lord, what do I need to do with this? I don't wonder if the Lord's going to speak to me. I know the Lord will. And just, it's like, this, that, you need to do this first. And, and I catch myself many times, Lord, I need you to help me with this, Lord. And as soon as he does, I always say, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, for helping me with this.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps me aware of that relationship. It's a constant. It's an ongoing. Every moment, every waking moment, when I wake up, when I go to sleep, it is and it has to just be built. And listening to the Lord. There's times that the Lord has spoke to me something, and I'm like, was that me? No, that wouldn't have been you. You're not that smart, or you're not that insightful. That was God.
Yeah.
You need to go pray for some, you need to go, and that relationship was built too as you obey. Just as a relationship with a child and your parent, the parent, obedience is so important in that relationship. And I think that's so important with me. And I know the Lord has times asked me to do things. I mean, one of the hardest things is to go and to ask somebody to forgive you when you're not the one that offended. You were offended against, but God, I want you to go. That's hard. But that's part of why I feel my relationship is where it is today, because God knows that when he needs me to do what I need to do, or he needs me to do.
Dallas Willard talked about a lot about being in conversational fellowship with the Trinity. And, he was a firm believer that we should listen to God, that we should hear God, but we should also be in conversation with him. And so just like any relationship, you have to build it. You got to work it. You got to be aware of it. You can't be self-focused. You got to be selfless, not selfish. And so I really enjoyed our time, and I'm sure you'll see Sparky again in some future video. But we hope that you've gained some insight and some encouragement from this video today. Remember, we are Straightforward Therapeutics. We are straight because we're laser focused, right? And we're forward because that's the only way to make progress. And we are shooting for what?
Progress, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection. That's right. So every day, move the football a little closer to the goal line, will you? And so anyway, I will see you next time. God bless y'all.